I have been waiting since the start of this channel to make this video, because the black horror genre is such an interesting topic to me, because it basically is black history, or black history is black horror, depending on how you look at it. Dating back to the horrors of the early days of cinema when black characters would be made using blackface and people of color would only be portrayed on screen as either voodoo witch doctors or servants to white people. Then after that, people of color weren't even on screen, but instead were just metaphors for the monster movie craze of the 1930s to 60s, with monsters like King Kong and Creature from the Black Lagoon, for example. As much as I enjoy these two movies simply for just being classic monster movies, I can see the racist undertones that they obviously have. A lot of that started to change with the blaxploitation era of the 1970s, when things started to get a little better in regards to black people on screen, but wasn't perfect either because a lot of these movies were made by white people that were just throwing whatever at a wall to figure out what would stick for profit, leading to a lot of racial profiling and stereotypes being portrayed on screen. Though there was black actors being represented as the heroes of these stories, so some people do look back at this era through more of a positive lens, despite its flaws that have become more noticeable over time. Then came the 1980s, and I'm just going to address the elephant in the room here. This is the era that started the trope that black people always die first in a horror movie, which isn't completely true all of the time, even dating back to when this trope began, but was more of a joke or a running gag than anything else, and wasn't always done in a distasteful way because sometimes the sacrificial black person at the start of a horror movie was done to make the villain look like more of a credible threat by killing off the big, strong black man first. Though it did lead to black actors getting less screen time, unfortunately. Once the 90s started to roll around, we started to see the rise of black filmmakers in general, and black women being portrayed on screen more often, not just with horror movies, but with horror movies as well, which led to a lot more socially conscious type horror movies, and it's kind of been uphill since there, with black horror movies mixing in with the current trends that come and go with the times, and it's basically its own subgenre now. We don't get a whole lot of every subgenre of horror every year, but we do usually get a few of each every couple of years, though there has been a lot of black representation on screen when it comes to horror movies lately. They just don't always focus on the horrors of black people specifically all of the time. So with that said, I wanted to make this video to give you 5 of the horror movies that I like to watch during Black History Month, and 5 of what I feel to be the more important films in the history of black horror, starting with the more important ones, in no particular order. Tales from the Crypt, Demon Knight from 1995 is the story of the first black final girl as we know them by today's standards. There was previous black women in horror that made it through to the end of a movie, but not by the true definition of the trope that is the traditional final girl as we know them today. It was supposed to come out in theaters and ended up going straight to video instead, though this was during a time period where the quality of straight to video was much better than what straight to video on demand has become today. And for those that are unfamiliar with the Tales from the Crypt series, it's basically Goosebumps for adults, with different stories that are based on a comic book that was also made into a cartoon during this time period, bringing it even farther into the pop culture of the 90s. It's got a good use of practical special effects, the gore is good, the acting is good, it tells a good story about space demons attacking the world, and it can be a little campy, but that was the trend during this time period. Tales from the Hood from 1995 was also a cultural landmark during this time period, by bringing a black perspective to the horror genre through an anthology of shorts. If you want to get an idea of the different type of black horrors that exist in our world or in the black horror genre itself, then this is actually a great place to start. It's a lot like Tales from the Crypt, so it does have some campy moments in it and is very mid-90s, but that doesn't feel like it's a bad thing here. It also got rebooted with Tales from the Hood 2 in 2018, with Keith David, who has been known to play some famous black actors in horror movies like The Thing and They Live. He's also voice acted for a lot of cartoons and video games over the years. It felt a little low budget by today's standards, but it had more of a focus on women and interracial relationships. Tales from the Hood 3 also came out in 2020, starring the late great Tony Todd, aka Candyman himself, with more of a focus on kids, though it does have a little more variety than just that, and was probably my least favorite of the 3. It did feel like it had a bigger budget than the other 2 movies, but it just veered away from the black perspective of horror a little too much for me, compared to the other 2 movies in this trilogy. Blackula from 1972 was the first black vampire movie that, through its success, helped launch the blaxploitation era of the 1970s, but was directed by one of the first black filmmakers from a major film school to achieve commercial success. As a result, it went on to not only spark the blaxploitation era itself, but also influenced other films such as Candyman, Tales from the Hood, Bones, and Blade. It's a parody of Dracula that is very 70s with its acting and action sequences, but I found it to have a comedic charm about it in a so bad it's good kind of way, just from some things not aging well, but not throughout the whole movie, and I did actually love that about it. Plus the music is fantastic. I noticed that through this movie you can really see where zombies once drew inspiration from vampires in a lot of ways, because they both portray different types of the living dead on screen. It tells the story about a black man who gets bit by Dracula, then is shipped off to LA and wakes up years later, who then falls in love with a woman that looks like his late wife. Up next we have Candyman, which was the first black supernatural slasher villain from back in 1992, with the late great Tony Todd himself, rest in peace. It's about a white woman doing her thesis on Candyman, trying to debunk the myth that if you say Candyman 5 times in a mirror that he will appear behind you, who ends up getting framed by Candyman for murders that she does not commit. Candyman is a great example of how horror can sometimes be cinema too, without being all about the blood, guts, gore, and jump scares. Though there are some fake jump scares at the start, but it's more about the story and the social commentary it has to say about impoverished Black Americans. The legend of Candyman is that he was an artist that was the son of a slave back in 1890 that educated himself into upper-class society who got killed for falling in love with a white woman. In a horrific death that involved him getting his hand set off with a rusty blade and honey smeared all over him after a beehive had been destroyed, causing him to die from the bee stings before they set him on fire. So yeah, this movie has a lot to say with its messaging, and I love the use of art because Candyman initially was an artist. It was also remade by Jordan Peele in 2021, but the original is definitely the more iconic of the two movies. But if I was to pick one movie that was the most iconic in the history of black horror, it would be George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead from 1968. Because it was the first time a black actor had been cast as the lead character in a horror movie, and it came out during a time when there was a lot of racial tension in the United States. Up until Night of the Living Dead, there wasn't much black representation in cinema, especially not with a protagonist that represented a lot of what black people were thinking and feeling at the time. Like Night of the Living Dead did by having a black man take charge and be the hero of the story as a protector and defender of the people. So yeah, it has a lot of social commentary on the death of Martin Luther King, who died during the filming of this movie, and you can really see that in the rolling credits. While George A. Romero didn't initially write the character as black, but picked a black actor because they were best suited for the role, it went on to become one of the first black horror movies and set the tone for what horror movies would then become, especially for and from the black community. Every movie from George A. Romero's Of the Dead series went on to feature strong black characters in them with themes of racial struggles, if you would like to watch through all of those as well. Up next, we have the movies that I personally like to watch this month, on top of the ones that I just mentioned. Though some of them are less culturally relevant, but I still like to watch them anyways, because I think they are fun movies to watch this time of year. So let's start with 28 Days Later. While this movie doesn't explicitly address race in it, that's part of what makes it so great. It does, however, have one of my favorite black female protagonists in a horror movie, who is often regarded as one of the most badass black women in the history of horror to a lot of people, not just me. It's a British zombie movie that is a bit of a slow burn, with running zombies that pop up periodically, and was a turning point for the zombie genre in a lot of ways at the time of its release. Like, it's really quiet for a zombie movie of its time period, with a lot of use of liminal spaces and a dire feeling of overall emptiness in places that once had a lot of people, not just visually but with sound as well. It was also one of the first movies to have fast-running zombies in it due to its realistic rage virus. And overall, I just love how much of a strong leader Selena's character is in this. She really does steal the show here. Aliens vs. Predator from 2004. This one is definitely a change of pace because it's a science fiction horror movie, but it also has a strong black female lead character in it who is regarded as one of the most badass black women in the history of horror, because Alexa Wood's character is basically like the Ellen Ripley of black final girls when it comes to horror movies. It starts out with a bunch of lore and character development, which I really don't mind on this one, but the fight between the aliens and the Predator doesn't start till about halfway through the movie, which is to be expected from a versus movie like this, especially for the first one. The special effects are really good in a way that makes me wonder how a movie from this time period can have better looking CGI than what's coming out today. It's also a great winter horror movie to watch over the winter months that would pair well with something like The Thing, which is also great to watch for Black History Month. I just wish they would have made more movies with Alexa's character in them because she's one of the reasons why this movie is so great. The First Purge from 2018. This movie shows racism through more of a modern lens than any of the movies on this list, and deserves to be recognized for being the Purge movie that has a mostly all-black cast in it. It's about impoverished Black Americans being paid to kill each other by the government, coming together to fight against white supremacy and systemic racism. It's a good movie that, unlike the other Purge movies, takes place in one city with people watching from home, so it kind of reminded me of a modern-day Escape from New York or Escape from LA type movie in that regard. It does play to the Black stereotypes of gang wars and prison inmates, but that kind of makes sense in the context of this type of movie because it's basically a slasher that takes place in the streets, except everyone everywhere can kill you all of the time. It is scary to think that this is probably the most realistic Purge movie that could potentially happen if things get bad enough. But if we could just see less black horror movies involving prison inmates, that would be nice. Because that trope is getting kind of old at this point. Though it is used kind of sparingly in this one. You know I gotta include a silly B movie on this list to lighten things up for you when things get too heavy. So for that I bring you The Blackening from 2023. This one seemed to slip under a lot of people's radar when it came out, despite it initially getting good reviews at launch. It's basically a horror comedy about Black people being Black people in horror movies, but it does so through the perspective of Black people, so it is pretty funny and the type of movie that would be great to put on at a party or when you have friends over. It's about a group of friends staying at a cabin in the woods who find a racist board game called The Blackening that makes them answer non-traditional Black history trivia questions or die. I love this movie a lot and will be picking up a physical copy of it this month if it's not already here by the time this video goes up. I would advise against watching the trailer for this one, so I did cut out a bunch of spoilers as I usually do while making these videos. This last one, Get Out from 2017, is also very culturally relevant, not just by the social commentary it has to say on racial tension and Black history, but because this movie made Jordan Peele the first African American to win Best Original Screenplay at the Academy Awards, which is a massive milestone for fans of Black horror and horror fans in general because the Oscars barely recognize horror movies at all, and is my #1 personal favorite movie that I like to watch during Black History Month. It's about a white girl introducing her new boyfriend to her family, but she doesn't tell them that he's Black, though that doesn't seem to bother them. And that's all I'm going to say because this movie is really hard to talk about without spoilers if you haven't seen it already. I will say that it does turn the tables on Blackness being something to fear in cinema, and shows that white people can still enjoy a movie that isn't made with them in mind at all in any way. It's basically an exploitation type horror movie without all the blood, guts, and gore in it, and is a bit of a love letter to Night of the Living Dead, though the homages are very subtle, so you might want to watch that first to help you pick up on them. It's also my favorite Jordan Peele movie so far, and a great place to start if you're unfamiliar with his work. So to close this video off, I just wanted to say, to me, horror is one of the most important genres in cinema for so many reasons. But through a Black lens, all of those reasons get amplified and it becomes even more important of a genre by allowing the Black community to address their fears, anxieties, triggers, and traumas in the safe, controlled environment that is the horror genre. So I hope you watch some Black horror movies this month. There's a lot of great classics here to choose from that are very important to the history of the Black horror genre, and some non-traditional stuff too if you ever feel like you need a break from those. I will be leaving Just Watch links in the description below so you can find out where these are playing in your country. And if you're into B-movies, cult classics, hidden gems, and horror, or just in the mood for something different than what the mainstream media has to offer you, like and subscribe. And I will see you again in the next video with 10 more horror movies on Tubi that are actually good, part 2.